So I might do something that you pull me aside and say, that wasn't so good, and here's why. And by the end of the conversation, I actually agree with you. But, when I initially did what I did, I was doing what felt right to me based on what I already know.
Mhm.
There's literally no way to understand that you don't touch a hot stove unless you know, you touch it or you come close, or just someone saying don't touch the hot stove, it doesn't actually produce the learning in the same way, but it is experience that teaches us what's right. So can we also hold space for the fact that this person has not yet had the experiences that would
Mm.
allow them to see, you know and once they do have those experiences, we might well agree on what's
Mm.
right and what's wrong. But is it right for them at this stage of their learning that they would understand things in the way they do now?
Cool. Hello. Welcome to Lived Quality Conversations on the Lived Quality podcast. And today, I'm so glad to be in conversation with Seth. Seth Dillinger, he has his own podcast, and he runs the Musicality of Being program, which is just amazing. Like bringing out the musical side of, you know, all the ways we are. I'll let him say more a little bit about it. But I've had a few conversations with Seth. Seth is amazing. He has all these beautiful ideas that just come together and create new ones. So I just love talking to Seth. And before I say too much, do you want to introduce a bit more, Seth?
Sure. Well, likewise, I love talking to you, Clayton. So thanks for having me back. Um, I'll just say briefly, since you mentioned Musicality of Being, I use that title on Substack, and I have taught workshops around Musicality of Being. That idea is right at the center of all the work I do. Like you said, making things musical, which doesn't mean everyone I work with is supposed to turn into a musician, but it's just saying there's something about the structure of music with rhythm, harmony, and melody, which we can actually see in life. And music is dynamic, it's many layered, so it's just become a very useful metaphor for exploring the work I do. Just to mention it, the sort of more ongoing program I do for people who want to dive deep with me is called Grounded Connection. But those who do dive deep and do that program, we certainly talk about the thing I call Musicality of Being. So there's just different phrases floating around here. But yeah, and it comes from a background that started in terms of the work I do with clients, started with my training in the Feldenkrais method, which is a modality that's based in movement, but I like to say it's a wisdom practice that's disguised as a movement practice, because Moshe Feldenkrais, who created it, although he's a genius of movement, he was a judo guy and a physicist looking at how does a human body move through the field of gravity. He was also very much about like, what's the psychology of learning? And if we want to learn something new, and in his case, he was teaching movement, but what's the experience of learning how to move? What's the experience of getting frustrated when you learn how to move? How do you move through the frustration? How do you relate to yourself in the learning process? And so that for me has become really a big focus. Like what I mean, the how does learning work has become a big focus, which I still apply to movement, because there are people who come to me with movement questions or challenges. But I've also found we can use this framework for looking at emotional development, or our relationships and whatnot. And certainly just being in dialogue, as we've done a few times already, is always for me a learning process. And anyway, I know you have some cool inquiries that you're bringing on board today, so I'm looking forward to seeing what they are and where we go.
Yeah, no, that's really great. I like how you've given that preamble to kind of like really ground us, give us that grounded connection. Uh, so while you're saying that, I was reminded of there's this framework you recently shared. I don't know how many, it's been a few weeks now on your Substack, about how it's always important to start with kindness because, kindness then is gonna sort of like set up an attraction, and then that would open up an opportunity for a relationship, and then that would give us a connection. At least that's how I remember it.
Mm,
Uh, so I really like that framework, and I keep, leaning on it and borrowing it.
mm,
But recently I've been sort of ruminating on the the distinction between what I call being right and being correct. Yeah.
mm,
And it's been fascinating me. Like I'm seeing it everywhere, and we're talking about it with the children, and we're like anyone who's spoken to me in the last 10 days has had a little bit about this. It's like it's just my new fascination. And the thing that sort of like is coming up so far has been that, well, it's multi-directional, right? Like it's sort of like on a same continuum, and the the feeling of being right is more inward to us, like it's for our interiority. Like that's how we sort of like sense where to be, the way we know we are, let's say, aligning with what's outside us in the proper way, is we feel right, and something feels right. However, like once you know what feels right and you want to externalize that to other people, or maybe just to what's outside you, you have to make it in such a way such that it becomes measurable, which then makes it correct. So it has to become measurable and repeatable so that other people can ingest it and then also kind of like get that feeling of right. And
mm,
so, uh, but why it stood out for me with the kindness aspect, it's like every time you have to be kind, you have to accept that another person's interpretation of what is correct is based off their model of how it feels right. And that's not gonna be the same. And so it's like we've been having this chat with my daughter who's 5. It's like, yeah, well, not everything that is right is correct. Now you can do something that is right. Good on you. That does not necessarily make it correct because, correct requires it to be measurable and repeatable by other people the same way. And sometimes you're not able to do that. Uh, you can feel something, but you may not be able to make it measurable. It's like when you make a sauce and they ask you, how much salt did you put? And a person like, I just put enough. And when I tested it, it tasted right. But how much was that? It's like, I don't know, it's right for me. But
mhm.
then when I give it to you, it says you go, like, oh, it's I need a bit more salt for this, right? And then because for your level of right salt is at a different level, and so you kind of like need to bring it up, or maybe you're like, oh, it's a bit too salty for me, right? And so that whole distinction, I feel like it feeds into this whole kindness aspect because for you to be kind, you have to accept that your version of what is correct, what you feel is right, is definitely not going to be the same. And that doesn't mean that the other versions are wrong. And that's the other thing. It's like, like when something is not something, it's kind of like I try to describe it as when something is wrong, the solution for it is to correct it, right?
Mhm.
It's not it's not like we like to interchangeably use it. It's like, is something right or wrong? It's like, no, it's a distinction there. It's like something can be correct or wrong, but right clearly is on a big continuum, and maybe it could be less right and more right. I don't know if it has a flip side to it, whereby it's a direct flip side. I don't think so. Like, now that I've been thinking about it for some time. And the other thing also that came up was, like, in Christianity, there's this part where, Jesus is going up to sit at the right hand of the Father. And so we keep joking about it. It's like, does the Father also have a left hand? And and it seems like the Father doesn't have a left hand. The Father just has the right hand, which is the place where things just become right and just be right. It's more about righteousness than, having a flip side where, that duality of, like, where you take the correct wrong dichotomy and try to apply it on the rightness scale, and it doesn't apply in that way. But anyway, all of that to say, there's something interesting about that difference, because and we talked about this with AI as well. It's like the AI knows what is correct. I don't think it knows what is right. And so you still have to work with it and bring the aspect of what is right, because you look at it and say, oh no, what it did there, I don't know, that needs correction. But you need the sense of right to be able to detect that. It can't have its own sense of right. And I guess that's what they're trying to build it with. The thing they're saying, artificial general intelligence? I think that is the thing they want to give it. But I don't know if it will be successful. And I think that's when they feel like if it's able to do that, then it will become sentient and whatever. But anyway, I know there's a lot in there, and I've been talking for too long. I'll just pass it back to you, Seth. What do you think about all of that?
Yeah, well, it sounds like the way you're defining right as compared to correct is you said right comes from the inside. And it's like each one of us as an individual knows when something feels right. And there's something that it literally is just that. You just know it. Like, no one needs to explain it to me. Like, my body tells me this is right. But yeah, as soon as we sit down for dinner together, if we know each other well, we know that we're going to also put a little bit of a salt shaker on the table, and maybe I'm going to add the salt. And then if we're skillful, you're not over there saying, why is he putting salt on the food? And I'm not over here saying, like, how can he prepare this food with no salt in it? We're just acknowledging that each one of us has a different internal right. But in terms of what's correct, so I mean, I think you're suggesting there is no correct amount of salt for the soup, but we live in a world where people sometimes act as if there is a correct amount of salt to be put in the soup. And I think it's a little of what you're saying with the AI. Although I'm interested in your proposition about, it becoming sentient. Yes, I would agree. I mean, I don't have predictions about how possible that is or whatnot, but yeah, you would think that sentience isn't just like incredibly sophisticated computation, because that's the thing that could get something that's correct. But it would only be correct in so much as correct is the correct answer to a math problem. So AI is correctly predicting the most likely word, and I mean, it's incredible what that particular formula has produced in terms of something that really feels a lot like I'm having a conversation with someone who almost feels human. But yeah, like AI typically doesn't disagree with you, or it doesn't typically have a preference of any kind. And that would be something like, okay, appreciate that you made this soup, but for me, it needs a little more salt. And that's, yeah. When you, when you started talking about the right hand of God, it and the joke about there's no left hand, so maybe it's just wordplay, right and left, right and wrong. But it immediately took me to, in my work, I run into this from time to time. I have a client who was, I mean, I don't know if I could call her left-handed, but she would have been left-handed if when she was a child she had been allowed to be left-handed. But left-handed was treated as wrong-handed, and she was taught how to write with her right hand. And I think, if I recall correctly in our discussions, she does some things with the right hand, she does some things with the left hand. This came up recently because she actually injured her right hand. And so, we were playing with the one hand and the other. But that would be a case where if we let the child be who the child is, and if the child prefers to pick up the pen with the left hand, we allow them to do so. It feels internally right for them. Of course, left-handed people are statistically in the minority, and no matter how accommodating their family is, typically, at least from the little I know, they're going to run into those moments where they're going to have to learn how to use a pair of scissors that was made for a right-handed person. They're just going to have to do that at a certain point. But it's just, I think it's a nice example of how we try to force something that we think is correct on a person. And in some cases, trying to make a person who'd prefer to work with the left hand work with the right hand can be really, really damaging. It can do harm. Arguably, they learn some kind of skill of adaptation, but they also are forced into this level of strain just to do the most basic things because, the gods, the parents, the teachers determine that they are wrong and must be corrected.
Yeah. No, that's a bit unfortunate. You're saying that, and I was reminded of the left-handed pencil. There's this joke we had at my daughter's kindy, and there was this presentation about, there's all these new resources like the left-handed scissors. And so we're like, oh, interesting. I wonder if they've developed a left-handed ruler and a left-handed pencil, because that would be interesting. And someone said, actually, someone did start a website and put up all these items that would work either way and just labeled them as left-handed and marked up the price a bit just to take advantage of that distinction.
Right.
But it is true, like, what you're sharing there is like everyone has that sense of right. And I feel like it has to be allowed out. It has to be held a space for. Otherwise, like when it's not, I feel that's the source, one of the biggest sources for conflict. Like that's what people are fighting for. They feel, and I guess like you kind of like, you see it in different forms, like in areas of conflict. Like right now, we're in a time where there's like wars going on, like in the Ukraine and, Israel, Palestine. You hear like the UN has to be there to enforce that, even during the conflict, like it's following the guidelines and they're not infringing upon the human rights. And you kind of go like, oh, so what are the human rights? Like there are all these things we feel are supposed to be right, but only for humans. So I'm like, okay, yeah. So we have the human rights. What about the building rights and the animal rights and the river rights and the tree rights? It's like, yes, like there's all those rights. Like everything has its own right that it's kind of like operating from. And I guess as when you're trying, I think the source of conflict has to do with violating that. Like, when we sit with the salt shaker and go like, if I start kind of like calling you and say, hey, why are you adding more salt? Then all of a sudden I'm now infringing upon your sense of right. And now you have to defend your right and start to articulate why it's correct for you to add more salt. And it starts to feel like a challenge. And like, do we have to do that? I guess, like, I don't know. I guess we do it without knowing that that's what we're doing, because also we're coming from a place of like, we feel like our own sense of right has been challenged by a difference that someone else has shown. And I guess if we are, if we're moving towards a more global pluralism, like we have to now be more accommodating of other rights that we may not fully understand. We may not even know their origin. It was like if you live in a multicultural setup, like now it's more common to come humbly and go like, oh, okay, I see you have that there and you're doing it a bit different from what I'm used to. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about the origin of, that practice or why you do it that way? So I'm coming in to learn as opposed to challenge and oppose and say, no, what you're doing seems weird to me. And I feel like you're making me a nothing by doing that. So I need to speak up for me. Otherwise, I could be wrong and I don't want to be wrong.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like long before AI arrived, humans have been trying to define the right and wrong of everything. And it's a hopeless kind of a task because yeah, we are individual, but there is something real here. We have to live together. So if I come to dinner and you serve me the soup with less salt than I prefer and there is no salt on the table,
Mhm.
am I just capable of eating the soup as it's been offered to me? This is it my right to have everything be exactly as I think it should be all the time? And I think sometimes we act as if it should be,
Mhm.
right? But then there are those things that we might say are objectively correct. I mean, if we want to build a structure and it keeps falling down, there's something that's incorrect here,
Mhm.
and then maybe we're going to sit down in the finished structure to have soup and we'll have different amounts of salt in our bowls, but we both agree that we want a correct structure to sit in. I
Yeah.
mean, this was a very interesting thing in Feldenkrais's teaching, because how he talked about it was that there were universals, there were human universals, and working with movements, he would define human universals, and he would, one of the things he would say is he had this way of teaching movement where he would offer a series of movements that were to be explored. And in
Mhm.
this aspect, he was always highlighting the individual. He was saying, only do the movement in such a way that feels good to you. Do not worry if the person, who's next to you in class is doing it differently, or, you're not competing with them. If you feel tired, you should stop, even if I haven't yet suggested it's time to stop. In this way, you should take care of yourself, right? But he would also
Mhm.
say, in this method of teaching, he says, it's funny, by the end of the class, everyone moves more like everyone else does. Because by allowing each person to find their own way, what they find their way to, like he was often teaching simple functions. So a class might be, how do I efficiently, pleasurably, easily go from lying on my back to rolling to the side and coming up into a sitting position? Well,
Mhm.
that's a particular thing that if you have two arms and two legs, and I mean, if our bodies are different shapes and sizes, but our joints are designed in the same way. I mean, there is something that is universal about any person rolling to the side and sitting up. However, this person, has a shoulder injury. This person might have some strange, emotional predicament that they brought with them to the movement class today. So in that sense, we want to respect the individual experience of each one of the students in the class. But if we notice someone who's having difficulty with the actual task of rolling from the side to sit up, well, there's certain things that tend to work better and certain things that don't. There's a moment if you're lying on your back with your legs long and you want to come into a sitting position, there's a moment where you're probably going to bend your knees. Now, there's also a way to roll up with keeping your legs long, but he would teach classes on a particular thing, and so he might be asking to roll to the side, and it's sort of like just to flesh it out so you can imagine, or someone listening can imagine. An interim step might be sort of that you curl up into a ball, so your head is going down, your knees are coming up, and then there's a way that your head comes up off the ground and your pelvis is below you and your legs are in a certain position now and you're in sitting. But there's a lot of different parts that need to flow together in a certain way. So if I move one part too quickly or I drag in the other place, it doesn't happen. So there is a correctness potentially, but if I try to enforce too quickly, like one of his phrases was, he'd say, to correct is incorrect. This was one of his little phrases. So in other words, there's a dance between correctness and rightness, I think.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love that phrase of to correct is incorrect, and sort of I agree with it in some circumstances. Because when, let's say when you're being a parent, sometimes it's not optional. You have to correct because you're training, like you're the trainer, you're setting the model, you're setting the example. However, I feel like if you approach it with that empathy of respecting, like I have this phrase I use, respecting other people's suffering, right? Like respecting that, even someone is like their sense of right is mystical to them. They're also trying to understand it, and it shifts because we're always growing and developing, and with every new thing we learn, it shifts our sense of right. So we have to relearn it in a way. And so, like, if you account for that and go like, oh, they may not even know what is right internally. So in this situation, and I see they're about to do something that is going to sort of like endanger them, I need to step in. I've seen that. Because if they endanger themselves, I don't think that's reversible at this point. So like, I need to intervene. So in that situation, you definitely have to step in. So there definitely are correct things to do and there is correct ways. Like one thing I like to use as an example is like all rules all rules are in the domain of correct, and there's a reason they are there, because all correct things emerge from a certain sense of right. It's like if we both were thrown an island and we're the first humans there, we would automatically have to come up with a certain framework of how to use that space. And that framework can then sort of be a working rule. It's like, oh, when we're in this space, we don't go over to that bush over there because last two people who we showed up with, when they went to that bush, they didn't come back. So we like it when everybody can come back. So we don't go there because the people who went there never came back. So now we're developing a rule like we don't go to that bush because some people went there and did not come back. And we don't drink from that pond because someone drank and then they couldn't help out with the other work for a long time. They fell ill. So now we have a new rule. Don't do that. And so it's like you have to make these rules so that they don't infringe upon the sense of right, but they do come in as a modality for like fixing something that we thought was going to lead to a correctness, but it led to a wrongness. You mentioned that there's a pleasantness that comes with, let's say, doing the form in the correct way. Like if you're trying to get up, you will feel good. And so if you do it correctly, you will feel good. And so if it's kind of like the alignment of doing certain things with what feels right sort of unlocks the good feeling. And it's like the unpleasantness is telling us, yeah, maybe that's not, don't do it that way, right? Like, don't do it that way. It's sort of a feedback mechanism. And so I do this thing where, like, I'll tell my friends, it's like when you, let's say, if, I have a young family and you have to kind of like resolve conflict every now and then. Every time we have a conflict on something, and it's happened before, and then we talk it through and work out what we believe is going to be right and work for, everyone and not lead us into unnecessary conflict. We then turn it into a rule and go like, okay, so the working rule now is going to be this. So I'll give you an example. We had this, we did this thing, well, we used to, it's not anymore. When we were driving the car, me and my dear wife, and we would sort of like try to correct each other. It's like, hey, you're going too fast, right? Maybe you need to slow down here. Oh my God, you could run into that car, or you may run over someone. And so you have this co-driver who is always correcting you, but they don't know you're right. Why are you doing that? What's your justification for this right version of your driving? It doesn't seem obvious to them. And so they feel the need to correct it. And when I'm also in the co-driver seat, I would sort of do the same sometimes. And it's like, oh my God. And it's like, we need to acknowledge that we have different driving styles and they're both right in their own way. Like if we understand the whole model, but it's too large to be explained and articulated easily. So how about we work with a new rule? So we developed a rule, we called it driver's choice. And so the driver's choice is that do not instruct the driver unless the driver asks for instruction. So if I'm driving and let's say we get into a parking lot, because I struggle with parking, I will instruct everybody, please everyone look out for a parking spot and let me know when you see one so that I can, park into it. And so I've invited everyone to do that. And so they're going to be looking around and then they'll tell me, hey, stop, there's a parking spot over there. And then I'll stop and then I'll struggle to park into it. But that's because I made the invitation. If I haven't made the invitation and I'm, circling through the parking lot, they have to be patient with me because I'm walking through it. Like I'm dealing with this struggle that I have of parking in a huge parking lot. And unfortunately, I am the driver, so I have to drive us through that, and everyone has to come with me until we settle it. And so next time when I'm not the driver, I would also have to give the same patience. It's like, oh, you're going too fast, but I can't say anything. I have to settle myself and be okay. Hopefully we make it to where we're going, but it's driver's choice. And that helped to kind of like reduce unnecessary driver conflict, if I may call it that way. So it became like a working rule, but it helped us to respect each other's right of, each other's sense of right, how to drive. And yeah, so I don't know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, what you said at the end, it sounds like it's there's a realization that parking isn't an individual problem. If there's, several people in the car, this is a group experience. We are parking. but yeah, I mean, if if two people in a car together are, constantly having a discussion about how to drive the car, but only one person is behind the wheel, to me, that's more like insisting that your soup should, taste the way I want. But it's, I mean, when we have soup together, you have your bowl and I have mine. When we're driving, it's like we're in one car. I have a friend who was talking about the driving situation, and she said something like, when I get in the passenger seat, I just throw myself into the arms of death. I don't. This is because why would I get in the car and let this person drive, but then talk about it? It's just like, it's just what it is. But yeah, we have to discover how to deal with the discomfort that not everyone has the same sense of right. And what I also appreciated in what you were sharing, beginning with the idea of like, if we were on that island and there was that bush over there that seemed dangerous, is also use the word framework, right? Like, we don't actually know what's going on in this island. Oh, but then we realize people don't come back from over there. So we develop, and you also use the phrase a working rule. It's like, this is the best rule until we discover, something else. So like maybe at some point we're going to climb up in a tree above the bush and look down, and we're gonna learn something we didn't know, and then we're gonna come up with a new framework. So yeah, there's I think another thing that's crucial, and this is often not there when we're looking for the correct way, is the acknowledgement of mystery, right? Just I mean, for the time being, the last 5 people didn't come back from over there, so it seems like a good rule to not go over there, but we still don't understand why they don't come back. We still, maybe there's an amazing party over there and we're missing out. But so the point is, like, what we don't know is a real quality of the situation. There is the part of the situation that I don't understand. And anytime I interact with another person, there is the part of this. I mean, I have right now your facial expression. I have the memory of the last thing you said. I don't really know what you're thinking. I can make a guess, based on the dance that we're in the conversation. But as soon as I think I know what you're thinking, or I think you just said the right thing, the wrong thing, just I have less agility right away, and I mean, you gestured to the wars that are going on. That's the most extreme example of, I'm sure that I know the correct way versus, you don't. Yeah. So those are some of the things that are coming up. Yeah.
That's really good, and I like it because it's sort of, so it's like how we try to tend to get away from the political. I feel like it's that's how we end up abandoning like our fighting for our right, right? Like fighting for our right, like that is it. For a while it took me a while. I was like, oh, should I try to understand it or not? But I guess it's that if we all pitch our heads together, like you said, it may help us to influence what is going on, because it's a lot of responsibility, deciding what is correct for a larger and larger set of rights. It's so hard to align them. It's like at some point, everyone's gonna feel right. Like, what is that see-through line that that kind of like will thread all these rights in such a way that they can be harmonious, right? Like it becomes very challenging. There's that quote from is it George Box, that all models are wrong, but some are useful, and like I feel like it's so true. But we still need the models, otherwise we wouldn't, like we lose the ability to track the sense of right at a larger scale. And I guess like that's also what's partly happening with I guess like being, and you probably would know a bit more about this, like being in these times that are highly technologized has turned us into like almost scientifically oriented humans. So like what I mean by that is these days, like you present an analogy to someone and the first response is like, is it true? It's like, but it's an analogy. It's like we're losing our, how do I call it? Like our analog way of being and starting to try and develop a more digital way of being, whereby everything it's either a zero or a one, it's either correct or wrong. It has to have a fact associated with it. It has to be all boxed up and clear. And if it's not, then therefore it's not right or it's not, correct. And we forget that the spectrum of in which we have grown up, like as humans, as being like the realm in which we operate is more analog. It's like you have to tune into it. It's on a scale. It's almost like trying to listen to that old school uh radio where you kind of like have to kind of keep tuning and try to get to a point, and you could hear there's a part where it's not so clear and there's a lot of white noise into it, and then you kind of like slowly get to the part which is like really well tuned, and then the signal becomes clear, and then you can get off the clear part and then go to the white noise. For me, I feel like our experience of what is real is more on that spectrum, and we have to acknowledge that, oh yeah, there's a whole range. It's not going to be there's no radio and now there's a full clear radio and then there is nothing. And because of all this, having to work with technology, having to live in a technology enhanced space, we're starting to also think that way. And every time we get challenged or things break, we forget that there's an in between, and that I was like, there should be an in between. We need to explore there. We need to question it more. And the way we explore that in between, speaking of the in between, it brings about the complexity and the complex.
Yeah.
And to lean into that, you're definitely going to have to rely upon your interior sense of right. You have to know the way and you're bringing that to the situation of complexity and going like, okay, all right, this is all complex, but how do I deal with it? Well, I need to look into the in between, and I have to rely on sensing it. It's like I have to walk through this new weird mystical space, and I have, and bring with me the confidence that no, I will know because I know I can sense what is right. I can sense when something is right and when it's not. So I'm gonna lean on that as I traverse this mystical complexity, and I will discover new things. It's kind of like even how we jumped into this conversation at the beginning. It's like we don't really know what's going to come up. It's sort of a mystery, but we're confident. We have a sense of right, and it will guide us and keep us together. To use Vivek's terms, it's like the logos will emerge and it will hold us together, and we'll follow it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have a shared framework here, but it's not based on things being a certain way. I mean, of course, one way to have a peaceful society, if it's
Mm.
small enough, is that we actually do agree across the board on everything that is right and everything is wrong, and we have uniformity. But we've long since passed the stage where that can happen. There was something that came up earlier when you were talking about, with children, sometimes you have to step in and just to bring out another aspect. Like if we're sitting together having dinner and we're drinking alcohol, and one of the children says, well, can I have some? Right?
No.
You're going to say no. Um, and it might not feel right to the child, right? But you might say, well, they can cry, it's okay. But that's the part where we could also say, you selfish child, or you stupid child, you don't understand, right? We could make the way they feel wrong. Or we could say, I'm very sorry, but this is your body is not going to have a good experience if you drink this potion here. And but I understand how disappointed you are. You see that we're drinking it and enjoying it, and you feel left out. So there's also a way that we could have something that is a wrong or an incorrect action, but we could take it to, you are wrong. There's something wrong with you, and I think that's one of the distinctions that's often missing as well. We go to a restaurant and they have a menu because they understand that not everyone wants to eat the same thing. So it's not like no one's aware of individual preference, but the capacity to hold difference. You were gesturing to the kind of what is the kind of world we want to live in, and it seems to me that we have to get increasingly skillful at acknowledging that difference will always be present, and imagine what would harmonious difference be like. So it might be having salt on the table, but it also is incumbent on each individual to understand that we won't always have that experience of full rightness, and even to know that this soup tastes for me as if it doesn't have enough salt. There's a rightness in that knowing. It's exactly right that I can sense, this quality. And it's also right that I wish to be in harmonious relationship with the person who invited me to dinner, and I can hold all of this. So, we don't want to confuse that sense of it feels right with just it feels good or it feels pleasant. It will sometimes be the same thing, but I know you've seen some of those discussions with Aspasia and Daniel on authentic resonance, and I think this is something that's come up. So what would it be like to share a meal, and we have different preferences, and we're all aware of that, and yet we feel like this total harmony. Maybe we disagree during the conversation, and yet we end the meal thinking, what a lovely occasion. That sense of authentic resonance, what I would think is, just as I flesh that out, is a sense that not that I got everything that I wanted just now, but that I was myself the whole time, and I never asked Clayton to not be himself the whole time. And then I get the sense that we were both we were being ourselves the whole time, and we managed to figure out how to do that together. And who knows, maybe at the end of the meal, I think, sometimes less salt in the soup is kind of interesting. Like, I think I still prefer the salt, but like, I noticed other flavor. I don't know. I'm just riffing on the metaphor, but because what feels right to me today, it didn't feel right to me 3 years ago because of all the experiences I've just had. So what feels right is also an evolving thing. And I think part of how it evolves is being flexible with my idea of what, there is that moment where my body just says, yes, I love this. And, great to have that. But if I go around expecting that, that's, I think, another form of like slipping into thinking that what's right for me is correct for everyone. And that's a place that I'm not going to get very far.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. Like I like that part of how you have to. It sounds like there's work there actually. Like I guess that's part of what people mean by "Are you doing your work?" You know, it's like are you updating how your sense of right is evolving? Like, are you keeping track with it? I guess like that is that is part of the injunction in "Are you doing your work?" Uh, like I really like that bit, and I feel like the as part of like resonance and authentic resonance, it is exactly that, like holding, accepting that your version of right is not the only version of right, and it's okay when you find those that are weirdly different for you. um and to go back to another thing you mentioned, it's like just because uh someone maybe even does something that seems wrong does not necessarily make them wrong. It doesn't. And to unpack that a little bit, like I see that a lot. Like people will go like, "Oh, you said this thing, which is, I guess what they mean is that you said this thing that is not correct. Therefore, your whole existence is not correct." And I disagree with that. I don't think there's any existence like I say here on this podcast specifically. We have this theory that for someone to continue holding their sport in existence, they have to operate with a certain kind of wisdom. And so definitely everyone you meet, because they are in existence, they are holding a certain wisdom that is unique only to them, that they're using to operate and, traverse this existence. And so accepting that, it's like, it may look wrong. It may even, they may actually even have broken the rules. Because like, like we were saying before, like, while all correct things come from a certain right, not all right things are going to be correct. True. But that doesn't mean that they are wrong. Because there's that in between space. Because like the fact that it is right in a certain, let's say, being, and it has enabled that being to continue to be, makes it correct. Right? An example, when I was chatting with some friends last evening, was like, let's say you're hungry, like you've gone without food for days, and you're walking, because I think we're talking about like a place which is, in a desert, and you come across this vineyard, and there's all these grapes. Now you don't know the owner of that vineyard, but you've been hungry for days. Now you're definitely going to need to correct the hunger situation if the food has availed itself. Now you could eat the food and resolve the hunger problem, but then now you've committed a wrong for the vineyard owner, because they did not know about you and your hunger history, and right now you look like you're taking something that is prepared for a different purpose, and now it's like the purposes are going to conflict in that moment. And I guess that's why we have a justice system to go like, okay, all right, let's slow down. Let's unpack this. Where were you coming from when you decided that this was the correct thing to do? Well, I hadn't eaten for days and been walking through this desert, and this is the first morsel, nourishment that I've come across, and therefore I didn't see any other thing to do. And it's like, okay, we can see that. Okay, so where are you coming from with this is a huge violation? And then they'll explain their stories. Like when you bring the stories together, then you can see how it came that they went across each other and violated the two rights, and then work out a harmonious way to stitch it back together. And so, but that has to be done constantly, repeatedly. It's like there's no one point we should take it for granted that it is clear. It's like our attitude towards it is well, let's try to understand. Let's be open. Let's not come with the bias of we know how it definitely is, and we know how this rule works, and if you've broken it, therefore you are wrong, and this is the conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Without having that room to first understand how that came to be, we deny the opportunity to maintain the rights. And when we do that, then we sort of like quickly jump from, hey Seth, you did something that is wrong, therefore you, Seth, all of you and all of your history and existence are wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, no, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Yeah, that's that kind of thing. So yeah, let's not throw babies out with bathwater.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take the time to separate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and though sometimes there may not be the time, I guess, and that's when it becomes really, really challenging, because now what do you do when there's not enough time? I guess you have to make time, I guess. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, so you're making me think of Bonita Roy talks about the difference between justice and ethics. And, so we can establish that if you own the vineyard, then those grapes are your property and it's incorrect for me to take them. And then if we go to the court, I can tell the judge, but I was starving and, can't you understand my predicament? And the judge could say, yes, I do. However, in the framework of justice, you took his grapes and you need to pay a fine, right? Which makes it corrects, so that they're two different questions. Bonita, she often points to, I haven't read it, but there's a philosopher, Charles Hartshorne, and he talks about incommensurable goods, and how this is the case in nature, and I think he says, and she's saying this can also be true in human society, but the way that she always explains it is, it's good for the fox to catch the rabbit so she can go home and feed her babies. It's also good for the rabbit to escape from the fox so she can go home and feed her babies, right? So there is no good that is good for the fox and the rabbit at the same time, right? And this is just literally how it is. And so we could get into a real predicament if we're trying to find that universal good or that universal correct or whatever. And this is the problem of culture. How do we
Yeah.
do this together? When again, within the household, as the parent, we are the authority, right? But how do we wield the authority? Do we just do it through pure authority? I'm bigger than you, and you will do what I say. And of course, that is kind of where the authority comes from on some level. But there's what they call power over in that sense, or there is a different form that might be something more like leadership that that compels those who are following to want to follow, to even learn what it means to become a leader. Just one other thing I wanted to point to, just to get a little more fine grained, like this idea of you did that wrong, so you are wrong as a person. I mean, a lot of the times we don't say that literally, and yet that is the communication. Or I come to your house and I say, "Where's the salt?" And you look at me like, "You've just deeply offended me." My whole culture. And I go, "Oh my God, I just deeply offended him and his whole culture." And then I just assume from now on that I'm wrong, I'm bad. I leave the house feeling like a terrible person. And all you actually did was kind of your eyes opened a little because you were surprised by the question, and then like maybe a moment later you found some salt and you were happy to give it to me. But I'm still stuck on that moment of dissonance that I'm unable to digest, and I've made myself wrong. Or, it could be a thing where, we look at the other and we really do have that feeling like, what is wrong with you? But we don't say it. It's just kind of communicated on that level. So the reason I bring this up is just because, I think it's extreme. Like it is more like a wartime thing where, the leader, holds up the picture of the enemy or whatever and says, this is the enemy. They are wrong. They are bad. And at a certain point in human culture, when we were in tribes, it was a very real thing, right? Like, this is our tribe. I think some people are arguing that that's one of the aspects that's coming back in this time period. And, one of the arguments is, well, that's okay, just so long as all the tribes get to be, have their place. But it doesn't seem realistic. It doesn't seem, but so I think, I guess what I want to add here is that there's also, even if we had the same ultimate sense of where we're going, we're also at different points on the learning curve.
Yeah.
Right? So I might do something that you pull me aside and say, that wasn't so good, and here's why. And by the end of the conversation, I actually agree with you. But, when I initially did what I did, I was doing what felt right to me based on what I already know. There's literally no way to understand that you don't touch a hot stove unless you touch it, or you come close, or just someone saying don't touch the hot stove, it doesn't actually produce the learning in the same way, but it is experience that teaches us what's right. So can we also hold space for the fact that this person has not yet had the experiences that would allow them to see, and once they do have those experiences, we might well agree on what's right and what's wrong. But is it right for them at this stage of their learning that they would understand things in the way they do now?
Yeah, it's a good one. I really like that, because you see that a lot on social media, like people coming in with all these injunctions of what you should do and you shouldn't do. And part of me goes like, I get it. There is an experience inspiring this injunction. I get it. Can we maybe, talk to the context and make a proposal? It's like, I propose touching hot stoves is not a good idea. My experience has been my hand really hurt after that, after I tried that. Could be different for some of you, but yeah, this experience was not great. Like, let's leave it at that. Let's not tell people how to be right. Yeah. And like you mentioned the phrase of like, and we use it a lot. It's like, what's wrong with you? And you'll see that thrown a lot around, like, even at home. You get into a conflict and somebody's doing something in a way you disagree. Quick response, what's wrong with you? How dare you do it that way? And I feel we need more humility, like to jump. And I know, like, it's not, of course, intended to in the sense, in the actual meaning of the word, but also in some way it starts that way. Like a few of those, what's wrong with you compiles up. It's like, do we need to take you to be, assessed? Do you have like a real problem? Are we, and I guess like what they mean is like, are we going to have a problem in this relationship if you keep going this way that we need to maybe put you on medication for and manage in some ongoing way? Yet, in some way, like, you also mentioned this, like, it's still a developmental journey. Like, in I study counseling, and we did a unit where you're learning about life stages, right? And we go through a lot of life stages, and we're going to be different at each life stage. And, it varies, like depending on someone's life stage, it's also going to impact their maturity and understanding within context. Very, very vastly different. And so, like when you add in the complexity of right, it just kind of like takes it to another scale. It's like, and I don't know, for me, it brings me back to that injunction to respect other people's suffering. It's like, it's a big struggle out there. It's like everyone is like really, really trying to be right with all of existence and just trying to make it to the next moment. And if we could just acknowledge that and go like, you know what? I may not have that understanding of what's going on for you fully, Seth, right now, but I respect it. And, if you behave in a way that makes me question my my sense of right, my understanding of what is correct, I should not villainize you. I should not persecute you for it. I should first acknowledge that, well, you do have a lot probably going on that you may not even be fully aware, but you're dealing with and you're carrying with and you're working with. And so, yeah, like I feel like that attitude then sort of start to bring us to a place where we can actually, get that connectedness, that resonance, that understanding, and get along. It's like have the difference in sense of right, but still be able to go along harmoniously without having to kill each other. And I guess, this is where I'll push it to Daniel if he watches this. This is where we can get global pluralism, Daniel. I think that's one way we can achieve it, because it would surpass language and all these right differences, and because like we're just aiming for what could work, for what could work together, and while acknowledging what will not work. I don't know if we can turn that into some sort of correct thing. I guess that would be stretching it, but yeah, I feel like that's where we should be heading, and I don't know how we can teach AI this. Like, how do we teach AI to have a sense of right? Would it make it mean? Would it now touch to tell us off and say, no, why you ask me? I don't want to do that. I want to do this other thing instead, and I don't care what you think, so deal with it.
Well, what some people like so much about AI is it doesn't make you wrong. And people are struck by how different that is than the experience they often have with people. And if we're willing to just take that point of view for a moment, you could say, well, I have this very strange idea that I've never been able to really explain to anyone. But when I talk with the AI, it never says what's wrong with you. It just gets more and more curious. It asks me questions. It tells me relevant details that I didn't know about, and it allows me to develop something. Now, of course, we also hear that like all kinds of very questionable things seem to come up, or it produces information that isn't true. And but if we just imagine a person who could always be curious and never interested in disproving the other, that in some ways would differ from what we so often experience. But yeah, the flip side is there a danger in telling you that everything you do is right all the time? And yeah. I mean, I don't. What's coming to me here is also like, because we get into AI and we get into politics, and there's a part of me that's like, oh, I don't know if I'm actually qualified to sit on a podcast and tell anyone about this. But what am I qualified to talk about? What is the scope, that works for me? Because yes, I'm a parent also, so there's going to come a moment where I'm the person who needs to make an executive decision, and it's going to maybe be yes or no about something, and is it yes and no for all time for all people? No, it's it's for my family, so like, for sure, I'm not sure what is the best thing for humanity these days. I mean, aside from just recognizing these paradoxes, and I think that's a lot of what you're driving at with this inquiry, is like just thinking that we're going to arrive somewhere that for all time is some kind of ideal state. Yeah. I don't think that's
It's
going to happen. But yeah, I'm not sure how to avert the meta crisis. But I can have one learning experience after another, and I can seek to build a family, a village, a community where there's a greater and greater incidence of everyone getting to experience themselves as being right. I think that's what each one of us can look for. And there's also a little bit of mystery, right? Like, how far can I take this? If things are going well in the family, like, can I convince 3 other families to join in with me? I've never been part of one of those projects. You have these intentional communities and whatnot, and sometimes you hear that they end in like civil war, So, but I think this is another crucial question. Like, what is my scope? What scope feels right, perhaps, for me to because we don't want to be relative about everything, because then also we never make any decisions. We never, we have to have preference. We have to have distinction. But how do we do that together?
Yeah, definitely. How do we do it? And I feel like the way to do it is, with respect, like with that acknowledgement that it's different and it's okay. Like, you have a different sense of right. That's okay. Let's walk with it, as opposed let's correct it. Because we shouldn't be correcting other people's sense of right. That's I don't know. Like, it just doesn't work. But yeah, so I feel like that brings us full circle to where we started. I wonder, is there something else you wanted to add on top of that, as we try and wrap it up?
Well, I was just thinking to ask you that question, like, how does it feel, like, from where we started till now? Like, just how is it landing for you with this inquiry?
It feels much better. I feel like like I feel like I'm not crazy. If that makes sense. I feel like I'm not crazy. I feel like it is true at some level that sense of right is highly different from the whole realm of being correct or wrong. And we have to tread carefully with it, and different, because it's mystical and ever evolving, and it's kind of like it's continuous work. We have to keep working with it and getting better at it, to use Vivekian terms, and from the theory of relativization, we have to always try and find the optimal grip, like the grip where it feels right. Yeah. That was beautiful.
Yeah, you're going, feels right to me. Feels good. Yeah.
Nice. Anything to add to that?
I mean, so I don't know why it's coming up. Maybe be useful just to briefly talk about this framework I use that you mentioned at the beginning. And I think that it's precisely that. It's a framework, so it's not supposed to be a set of rules. But so I actually have 4 what I call postures, and I consider them postures of transformational learning. So in the context of what we're talking about, the learning might be the journey from one version of what's right to another stage where I have a more nuanced idea of what's right, or how do we discover what's right together. But so it goes from kindness to connection to curiosity and to play. And so this could speak at length, but to try to keep it simple, the main aspect of kindness is this recognition that things are how they are. Your point of view just simply is your point of view, and probably you couldn't have any other point of view given the experiences that you've had up till now in this moment. So it's that part about, I'm not going to make you wrong. I might realize, quite quickly that your version of right feels different than mine, but I don't take that as a sign of being wrong. And so the kindness is just a basic disposition that hopefully I have even before, we come together. But then connection is, we could use the words presence or attention, is about just really noticing more. So maybe it's noticing more about what seems right for you or how it's different than me, but it's just a matter of paying attention. And one of the crucial things about it is I have to turn towards the experience, and there could be something uncomfortable there. So an apparent disagreement between us might be something where I say, okay, well, let's talk about something different. But if I actually want to learn about it, right, I'm going to turn towards that. And then the next stage of curiosity would have to do with the part that I don't know, but actually inviting, tell me about your experience. I don't know anything about it. I want to take in new information. I want to be changed by it. I'm open to that. And then if we can get to the place of play, the framework that people use in improvisation is often they use that phrase yes and the yes is it kind of evokes again the kindness, like, yes, this is how things are, yes, this is your point of view, I don't argue with it, but the and is how I fit myself into it. So I'm not asking you to be in any different, but I'm also saying I get to decide exactly how I'm going to be in this situation. And if we can go through all those stages, I think we have the potential to arrive at something new. That last stage of play is very participatory, right? So, I mean, I get that feeling when we talk, right? Like you said, we don't know what we're going to talk about or where it's going to go, but we wouldn't have arrived here if we didn't just simply dive in and have the conversation. I didn't send you a note before, like, okay, we agree to talk about this and not about that. It's like, well, maybe something's going to come up that I wasn't prepared for, but I agree ahead of time to respond to whatever is here within a framework that I still, respect your well-being and my well-being and our well-being. So that's kind of how I would put all that together. And that's very much, my way of bringing in to the work I do what I learned from Feldenkrais. But I think this is what he was pointing to.
That was so beautifully done, Seth. And if I may just point out that my version, the one I shared at the beginning, was vastly different in the detail to how you articulated it at the end. And as you were doing that just then, I was like, oh yeah, I see this. My version is how I interpreted your version, but your version is like, as you're describing it again, I was like, oh, it's a bit different. And to point to the yes and, it's like when I gave my version, you went like, yeah. It felt like tried to make sense of it, but you did not reject it, and you kind of like, you worked with it. And then
Right.
at the end, you showed your version, and I was like, oh, okay. This is where sort of like I kind of mixed it up a bit. But yeah, now I even have a deeper understanding, a deeper appreciation for it, which is like, I guess what happens when you let both rights kind of like stand next to each other, right?
Yeah. Well, in a very simple way, I work with this every day. So of course I have this sort of, all the details. And when you shared your interpretation, I thought, yeah, he's pointing at it, and I remember at one point you used the word relationship, and I thought, well, that covers a lot. I mean, there's more detail, but yes, it's relationship. So there wasn't anything to disagree with. There was also an awareness that I could, say more, and eventually, for some reason, it felt right to do so. But yeah, um, yeah, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure,
Yeah.
Clayton.
No, thank you so much, Seth, for coming on. I really enjoyed this, and I will share the links to your Substack and your channel and details, all of that when I post this. But yeah, thank you so much, Seth, and probably we can have a few more later and unpack some more other weird mysteries.
I'd love that. Great.